Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world where beauty doesn't mean contour palettes or ab workouts, but rather translucent skin, generous waistlines, and a 7-layer outfit that screams do not touch. Yep, we're heading back 1,000 years to medieval Europe to explore what sexy looked like before toothpaste, filtered selfies, or even decent lighting. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this trip with your dating confidence intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a cold stone room. A flickering candle does its best to throw light on a mirror so warped it might as well be a carnival trick. Your morning beauty routine. It starts with checking for lice, because no one's here to impress with beachy waves. What does count as sexy in this world? First, your skin better be pale, like haven't seen the sun since harvest pale. Tanned sur, skin screams peasant laborer, and that's not exactly hot in the courtly love department. Your reflection reveals a round face, full cheeks, and if you're lucky, a little extra softness around the middle. In this era, being plump isn't just socially acceptable, it's a status symbol. Only the wealthy can afford enough bread and ale to maintain a proper stomach roll. Thin, that's called sickly. Now get dressed, 7 layers of linen wool and possibly some itchy fur all cinched uncomfortably at the waist. No cleavage here. Sexy is modest, teasing, suggesting. If your wrist peeks out from your sleeve, you might cause a noble to drop his goblet in lust. There's no such thing as fast fashion either. Your underclothes may not have been washed since Easter of last year. Let's talk hair. The sexiest way to wear it. Hidden. Married women keep it covered completely sometimes under a horned headdress so wide you can't fit through a doorway. Loose hair is for virgins or saints. Historians still argue whether long braids were considered flirtatious or simply functional. Either way, lice combs are non-negotiable accessories. And don't get too excited about cosmetics. Rouge exists, but it's made from crushed bugs or brick dust and applied with fingers that just milked a goat. There's no perfume, but dried herbs and rose petals sewn into your garments might do the trick, unless you work in the stables, in which case everyone just accepts your earthy aroma. As you walk through a noble hall, you adopt what's called a graceful gait. Swaggering is for knights. You glide. You avert your eyes. You cast your gaze downward, not out of shyness, but allure. Flirtation here is a slow burn. You might spend months exchanging glances with a courtly admirer before he even says hello. In poetry, your beauty is compared to Lily's snow and occasionally a spotless goose. Yes, gooses were a thing. Your eyes should glisten like dewdrops, your voice soft as a harp's sigh, your laugh never too loud. Never. Want to catch someone's attention? Write a riddle and hide it in their chalice, or tie a ribbon on your sleeve, the medieval equivalent of sliding into DMs. If you're really daring, you might drop a handkerchief and hope someone gallant returns it with a wink. Yet behind the velvet and poetry things weren't exactly magical. Your breath smells faintly of onions and salted pork. Dental hygiene includes rinsing with vinegar and chewing parsley. There's no toothpaste, but at least the lack of sugar means your teeth might hang in there till 30. Quirky detail, some noblewomen smeared bat blood or crushed emeralds on their faces in hopes of warding off wrinkles. The results were mixed, and possibly itchy. But remember all this effort. The layers, the posture, the practiced glance. It's not really for passion. It's for powerland and family alliances. Flirtation might blossom into affection, but marriage, that's a political contract with a side of dowry. So there you stand, bundled in linen, whispering sweet Latin nothings, all while praying. No one notices the cabbage stuck to your slipper. You're sitting in this corner of a smoky hall, your eyes scanning a crowd of men who all seem to think chainmail is foreplay. Welcome to medieval masculinity, where being hot has less to do with charm and more to do with your ability to swing a sword and own land the size of a village. If you're looking for tall, dark, and handsome, adjust your expectations. You're more likely to meet sweaty, sunburned, and carrying a piglet. 1,000 years ago, the sexy man wasn't a gym rat with six-pack abs. He was a knight, or at least looked like he could borrow armor without falling over. Broad shoulders were in, but so were scars. A battle wound wasn't just a badge of honor, it was basically the medieval version of an Instagram filter. Makes you look rugged, mysterious, and possibly high-ranking. And then there's hair. Shoulder-length tousled and unwashed is the look du jour. Shampoo isn't a thing, but lard and egg yolks sometimes do the trick. The smell. A curious blend of hay sweat and whatever animal he rode in on. Still, if his hair is thick and his beard full, congratulations, you've landed the 11th century heartthrob. What really makes a man desirable, though, isn't his scent or smile. It's his land. That's right. Owning a muddy plot of earth is the medieval equivalent of driving a Tesla. A knight with acres and a manor house is every parent's dream son-in-law. Bonus points if he has fewer than 3 lawsuits over sheep theft. Of course, let's not forget status symbols. A shiny sword, a good horse, and a fine cloak trimmed with something fluffy like squirrel fur tells you he's not some random stable boy. Historians still argue whether the wearing of bright colors like crimson and gold signaled wealth or just painfully bad taste. Either way, if he can afford dyed fabrics, he's in the top tier of eligible bachelors. And sure, he might be covered in scars and a little aggressive with his roasted boar, but if he can recite a line of poetry or compose a half-decent love song on his lute swoon. Medieval women didn't get much entertainment, so a guy who could rhyme maiden with laden was basically a rock star. Still, this ideal male package came with complications. Chivalry sounds romantic, but it's mostly a code about when not to murder someone and how to ride a horse without stabbing yourself. That said, being courteous to women, especially high-born ladies, was a sign of refinement. So if your knight bows just the right way and kisses your hand without spilling ale on your gown, you're halfway to a courtly affair. Now picture a noble tournament, trumpets blaring, banners waving, and testosterone levels off the charts. It's basically a medieval mating ritual with less conversation and more jousting. The winner doesn't just get a prize, he often gets the attention of every noblewoman within flower-tossing distance. Tossing a garland to your favorite knight is the medieval version of hitting like on every photo he's ever posted. But don't get too dreamy. Under that polished armor is a man who hasn't bathed properly in weeks. His feet are swampy. His fingernails, let's not. Still, he writes you poems where he compares your smile to the moonlight on a still pond. And suddenly your standards shift. Quirky fact of the night. Some noblemen applied lead-based powder to their faces to appear paler and more refined. Yes, they were willingly poisoning themselves to look hot. Flirty and lethal. Also worth noting, the best flirts weren't always the best husbands. Marriage is about alliances, dowries, and making heirs, not candlelit dinners. Still, you might steal a few secret glances over goblets and smile as his calloused hand accidentally brushes yours. And there you are, again, wishing his horse smelled less like wet hay, but charmed nonetheless by his earnest eyes and painfully off-key lute serenade. You smooth your tunic nervously, waiting for the steward to usher you into the great hall. Tonight is the feast, and you've heard rumors that the local earl's daughter will be there, wearing her famous sapphire-studded veil and a neckline that defies gravity and social expectation. You brace yourself, because tonight, you're about to witness what sexy looks like for a medieval noblewoman. First rule: pale is powerful. Tanned skin. That's for peasants who toil in fields. True beauty stays indoors, preferably in a drafty stone chamber lit by a single candle and filled with the scent of rosewater and damp parchment. Ladies of status strive for that nearly translucent complexion, and if nature doesn't bless them with it, lead-based whitening cream will. Again, slowly poisoning oneself in the name of attraction is apparently timeless. The lips, however, are another story. Red and rosy is in. Crushed berries, beetroot juice, or even a dab of sheep fat mixed with pigment gets the job done. Historians still argue whether this was purely aesthetic or subtly suggestive, but one thing's for sure, smudged lips were totally worth the effort, even if it meant bees occasionally mistook you for a flower. Hair is an art form. Blonde was the ultimate aspiration, thought to be angelic and rare. If you weren't born with golden locks, don't worry. There's a DIY option involving saffron lye and long hours in the sun wearing what can only be described as a medieval tanning helmet. The result? Brittle, weird-smelling hair that looked vaguely yellow and totally irresistible to the right nobleman. Fashion-wise, we're talking layers. Lots of them. A noblewoman might wear a chemise, a kirtle, and a surcoat all topped with a belt that cinches the waist just enough to say, "I have good childbearing hips," without violating church modesty rules. And then there's the sideless gown, which, brace yourself, is basically the medieval version of a red carpet look. Sleeveless figure-hugging, and occasionally so daring that monks wrote actual sermons about it. But sex appeal isn't just skin deep. A noblewoman's charm lies as much in her wit embroidery skills and mastery of Latin puns as in her wardrobe. You see her glance slyly over her goblet, quoting Virgil, and suddenly every man within earshot is reconsidering his arranged marriage. A sharp tongue wrapped in silk, very on trend. Don't forget the accessories. Veils, circlets, jeweled hairpins. Some ladies wear headdresses so elaborate they need servants just to help them sit down. And perfume. Oh, yes. Distilled herbs, rose oil, even civet musk if they're feeling exotic. One particularly bold concoction was made from ambergris, a waxy whale byproduct, and cinnamon. Sexy. Maybe. Confusing. Definitely. Then there's the walk. Gliding slowly across the floor, ankles barely visible posture. Upright eyes cast just slightly downward. A calculated dance of allure and virtue. If a noblewoman lifted her skirts high enough to reveal a decorated shoe, that was borderline scandalous. You can practically hear the gasps. Still beneath the silk and symbolism, these women navigated a tightrope. Too bold, and they were accused of temptation. Too modest, and they were invisible. Their entire look had to whisper, "I am fertile, fashionable, and vaguely untouchable." But here's your quirky tidbit. Some ladies plucked their hairlines to make their foreheads look bigger. Why? Because a high forehead was the medieval beauty standard. If your eyebrows started halfway up your skull, congratulations, you were halfway to goddess status. Despite the effort, beauty wasn't just for catching a suitor. It was also about social positioning. Looking fashionable told the world you were rich enough not to need practicality. Like, say, being able to afford a 30-foot train on your gown that required 2 children to carry it behind you. Iconic. Still, you wonder how much of this is about desire and how much about duty. After all, noble daughters were bargaining chips in a political chess game. But for a moment in the candlelight, you see her smile not at the knight, not at the lord, but at herself. And in that flash of confidence, you realize beauty here is performance, but it's also power. The next morning, you find yourself among villagers headed for market day, and suddenly your concept of beauty gets flipped like a pancake on a rusty griddle. Because if you thought noble seduction was layered in lace and politics, wait until you see how regular folks flirt using onions, freckles, and a suspiciously clean apron. First off, in the peasant world, health is hot. You want to look sturdy. Not just, I can churn butter, sturdy, but I can survive a winter famine and still help rebuild the thatch roof, sturdy. Sun-kissed skin-wide hips and strong arms aren't just practical, they're downright desirable. You strut with a basket of root vegetables on your back, and trust me, someone's watching. Hair is rarely washed, and shampoo is a luxury most can't afford. But that doesn't mean peasants don't get creative. Rinses made from nettles, rosemary, or rainwater mixed with vinegar give your mane a little luster, just enough to keep it bouncing beneath your coif as you dodge cow pies. And yes, freckles. Loads of them. In fact, freckles could be a major flirt asset. In some regions, they were associated with youth and fertility. Others found them suspicious, like maybe you'd made a pact with a woodland spirit. Either way, they got attention. So what do you wear to impress someone at the local harvest festival? A clean smock, for starters. That's already saying something in a world where laundry involves freezing rivers and soap made of animal fat and ashes. Add a ribbon to your braid, or a pop of embroidery around your collar, and suddenly you're turning heads near the turnip cart. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Scandinavia, unmarried girls would signal their availability by placing a flower in their belt, or letting one strand of hair fall loose from under their headdress. The medieval version of single, and ready to mingle. But there's more to attraction here than aesthetics. How you move matters. Graceful steps, sure, but also the way you tend animals pour ale, or shoo off a goose without cussing. Grace under pressure. That's the 11th century equivalent of charisma. Conversations at the village tavern double as courtship rituals. A man might show off his strength by hefting a barrel or spinning tales of his plowing prowess. You in turn might recite a bit of local folklore or challenge him to a game of dice. Lose on purpose. Maybe. Win anyway. Definitely spicier. Historians still argue whether rural communities developed distinct beauty ideals separate from the nobility, or merely adapted them in pragmatic ways. One theory. The concept of natural beauty wasn't a reaction to court excess. It was its own enduring aesthetic, rooted in survival and resilience. Scent also plays a role. You're not exactly wafting rosewater, but fresh hay, honeyed bread, and wood smoke cling to your clothes in a way that's oddly cozy. Some villagers even carry aromatic herbs in small pouches, or tuck sprigs of lavender in their bodices to mask sweat. It's less perfume, and more, please don't smell the pig pen. And then there's dancing. Festivals, saints' days, or even a successful harvest call for music, ale, and open-air flirtation. The dances are rhythmic, social, and just close enough to let hands linger without scandal. One wrong step and you're blushing. One perfect twirl, and suddenly someone's eyeing you like a prize goose. You realize beauty here isn't polished. It's practical. It's laughing, with a mouthful of cider, fingers stained from berries, a smile cracked wide from weather and work. It's owning the chaos, letting joy wrinkle your eyes and knowing your worth even if your shoes are mismatched. And somehow that feels even more powerful than a jeweled headdress. Because when you catch someone's gaze across the goat pen, and they smile not at your outfit, but at your sheer vitality, you realize something in this world. Sexy isn't showy. It's survival humor and dirt under your nails. As dusk falls, you find yourself swept into the candlelit hush of a monastery scriptorium. The silence is thick, broken only by the soft scratch of quills and the occasional creak of old wood. You're not here to pray, though you're here to dig into what sexy looked like in religious circles. And spoiler alert, it's complicated, because in the cloistered world of monks and nuns, physical beauty is both revered and feared. You glance down at a richly illustrated manuscript, and there it is, Eve, with flowing hair and an oddly sultry gaze holding that famous apple. In religious art, temptation is often feminine lush and perilously beautiful. The message is loud and clear. Beauty leads to sin. And yet, medieval theology couldn't ignore beauty entirely. Many believed that physical attractiveness was a reflection of inner virtue, at least when it wasn't being used to seduce someone into heresy. A radiant face could be seen as a divine gift, a whisper from God himself. But only if you didn't get too attached to it. Here's the twist within these walls. The body was to be disciplined, denied, even loathed. But that denial gave birth to a strange obsession. Monks wrote pages upon pages of poetry about the Virgin Mary's purity, often lingering oddly long on her fair skin and delicate hands. You try not to raise an eyebrow as a friar nearby dots an illuminated M with gold leaf shaped like a blooming lily. Subtle. Not really. Quirky tidbit, some religious orders went so far as to uglify themselves on purpose. There are records of women saints rubbing lime or ashes into their faces to mar their beauty and avoid attracting attention. Others wore chains under their clothes to remind themselves that the flesh was a battlefield. But even in this ascetic world, allure crept in sideways. Through music, through incense, through soft fabrics, like fine wool and linen used in sacred vestments. There's an unmistakable sensuality in the rituals, the pageantry, the flicker of candlelight on painted icons. You're not crazy. It's real. That pull between holiness and human yearning was very much alive. Historians still argue whether these fixations were a form of repressed desire or simply symbolic expressions of devotion. Some say that monastic culture sublimated sexual energy into spiritual passion. Others believe it revealed how impossible total denial truly was. You shuffle past a room where a novice kneels in silent prayer, her veil slipping just enough to show her cheek. Is she beautiful? Possibly. Is it supposed to matter? Not at all. But in a world where temptation lurks in every glance, the awareness of beauty becomes a quiet torment. In medieval Christian thought, the ideal woman was chaste, pale, and modest. Think downcast eyes, soft speech, and enough modesty to make a potato look flirtatious by comparison. That's not to say real women lived up to it. They were human after all. And religious figures like Hildegard of Bingen still managed to speak out, compose symphonies, and influence kings, all while cloaked in religious virtue. Men weren't exempt from the pressure either. A handsome monk might have to endure unwanted admiration from visiting patrons or noblewomen. One account tells of a particularly beautiful young monk being relocated because too many women were pretending to confess just to look at him. Yikes. And yes, relics played a bizarre role in the attraction economy. A saint's bone, a lock of hair, even an old sandal could inspire fierce devotion. There's something oddly intimate about touching something once part of a body, no matter how saintly. It's spiritual, yes, but there's also a faint echo of sensuality there, a fascination with the physical presence of the holy. You begin to realize that in this world, sexy isn't skin deep, it's dangerous. It's a test. It's something to be overcome. But at the same time, it's everywhere, woven into art liturgy, and the longing in every chanted psalm. So you slip out of the monastery with a mix of awe and unease, the image of a carved angel's faint smile burned into your mind. Here, beauty is both a blessing and a threat, and in a strange way that makes it more powerful than ever. Now you're in the Middle East, specifically in the bustling cities of the Abbasid Caliphate around the 10th century. It smells like rosewater and spiced lamb, and everyone seems to have an opinion on poetry. And that makes sense because here what's considered sexy isn't just how you look, it's how you speak. You're walking through a market in Baghdad, brushing shoulders with philosophers, scribes, and silk merchants, all debating metaphysics in the same breath as flirting. A handsome face might catch someone's eye, but true seduction here is a linguistic sport. You listen as someone recites a verse from Al-Mutanabi that manages to be both devastating and oddly flirtatious. It's electric. This society placed enormous value on wit, eloquence, and charm. Physical beauty mattered, sure, almond eyes, a fine beard, elegant posture. But what truly melted hearts was how a person used words. If you couldn't compose a proper ghazal, a love poem, well, you were about as appealing as a moldy fig. Here's a mainstream historical fact in the Abbasid world. Beauty ideals were highly detailed. Men wrote about the gazelle eyes of women, the smoothness of their skin, the graceful sway of their walk. And women, especially elite educated ones, responded in kind. Courtly women weren't just admired, they wrote back. Some even hosted salons where philosophers and poets gathered to talk beauty, politics, and love, like it was the same subject, which honestly it kind of was. Fringe tidbit. There were actual books cataloging what made someone attractive. Not just physically, though. Yes, they had charts for things like ideal eyebrow distance, but also things like voice tone, handwriting style, even body odor. Musk and oud were especially prized, and lovers might gift tiny vials of their own scent. Romantic or slightly serial killerish. You decide. But not all standards were one size fits all. In fact, historians still argue whether gender roles in romantic aesthetics were more fluid than commonly believed. Arabic poetry from this period includes passionate verses addressed to both women and men, sometimes in the same breath. Some poems praise beauty so abstractly that scholars still bicker over who the object of affection was. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it was about the feeling, not the gender. Another thing you notice, fatness was often associated with prosperity and charm. In sharp contrast to later Western ideals, round cheeks, full figures, and softness were considered sensual. There's even a famous medieval Arab joke about a man too thin to be loved. His lover complains that hugging him feels like embracing a broomstick. You pass by a perfumery, its wooden shelves stacked with tiny crystal bottles. You inhale something floral and honeyed, and it hits you. Scent was huge in this culture. A clean, fragrant body wasn't just healthy, it was downright irresistible. There's even a charming little instruction manual written by an Abbasid gentleman on how to properly bathe perfume and dress before a date. Spoiler, it ends with "don't eat onions." And let's not ignore the fashion. Men wore richly dyed robes, their hair oiled, and trimmed their fingers, stained faintly with henna. Women draped themselves in layers of translucent silk, sometimes stitched with gold thread, creating a mesmerizing effect in candlelight. You can't see everything, but you definitely notice everything, and that's intentional. You peek into a private courtyard where two young lovers are playing chess, their glances more strategic than the game itself. Every move is a signal. The way one touches the edge of the board, the tilt of the head, the slight delay before making a move, it's all part of the performance. And that's the key here. Sensuality in the Abbasid world was an art form, a performance with rules, gestures, metaphors, and consequences. To seduce was to speak, to listen, to understand nuance. A lover's letter might quote a Quranic verse, then sneak in a poem about wine and longing, just to keep things spicy. So while your modern brain might default to thinking sexy equals visible skin, this era flips that on its head. It's about what's not said, what's barely revealed. A lowered voice, a well-chosen verse, a whiff of ambergris on the breeze. You step back into the street, your senses overwhelmed by music scent, and whispered lines of poetry drifting from nearby balconies. Sexy here. It's stealthy, smart, and slippery as silk. And now, without warning, you're plunged into the rolling green of medieval Japan, somewhere between the Heian court and a gently murmuring stream. The air smells like plum blossoms and faint incense, and you're very much underdressed. Because here, beauty true heart-stopping allure is a carefully choreographed illusion of poetry, silk, and shadows. The people around you don't shout their hotness from the rooftops. They float it across paper fans. In the Heian period, seduction is an art of layers, literal ones. Your appearance is hidden behind 12 layers of silk robes if you're a noblewoman. If you're a man, your appeal rests in your calligraphy, your scent, and no joke, how elegantly you cry. Let's start with the mainstream historical fact during this period. 794 to 1185 CE aristocrats lived for aesthetics. Courtly beauty ideals were rigid and wildly specific. Women were considered most beautiful when they had floor-length black hair, shiny, thick, and brushed obsessively. Eyebrows were shaved off and redrawn much higher on the forehead, and teeth were dyed black to show maturity and desirability. Yeah, sexy was jet black gums. Men didn't get off easy either. They were expected to maintain an air of melancholy refinement. A beautiful man might wear several layers of finely dyed robes, write sorrowful waka poems by moonlight, and sob quietly when a flower petal fell the wrong way. Sounds like a lot, but apparently it worked. You walk into a candlelit room. Two court nobles are seated backs turned, their elaborate kimonos pooling around them like waterfalls. One slides a folded letter across the tatami mat. You realize it's a love note, but not just any scribble. It's written in flowing kana, perfumed, and tucked into a sprig of cherry blossom. In Heian culture, you're judged as much by the style of your handwriting as the message itself. Sloppy brushwork. That's a deal breaker. Beautiful script. Now we're talking butterflies in the stomach. Your quirky tidbit of the day. Lovers weren't supposed to see each other clearly until after a few romantic exchanges. Courtship happened mostly through screen doors under cover of darkness, or behind fans. So the whole visual aspect of sexy was based almost entirely on suggestion. The sound of a voice, the scent of clove-scented incense lingering on their robes. You might fall in love with someone's poetry long before you ever saw their face. But of course, not everyone agrees on the specifics. Historians still argue whether these aesthetic ideals were widely embraced or simply codified by an elite minority. Was the blackened teeth and layered kimono look really considered universally desirable, or just a weird aristocratic phase that stuck around too long? Some believe that many commoners quietly thought the whole thing was bonkers, but didn't dare say so obviously. Back in your borrowed slippers, you're ushered into a court event, maybe a poetry contest. Yes, that's a thing. Nobles competed by composing romantic verses on the spot, often themed around seasons or longing. A poorly crafted metaphor about falling leaves might cost you a date, a flawless one. It might win you a night of whispered verse swapping behind gauze curtains. Forget six-pack abs. You want a six-verse poem about dew. By now, you've noticed a pattern. Across cultures, what's considered attractive often includes things that are hard to fake. In the Heian court, that's emotional restraint, poetic skill, and personal fragrance. People made their own custom incense blends and wore sachets of clove and aloes wood in their sleeves. You could identify someone just by how they smelled. If that's not personal branding, what is? But for all the elegance, the whole system had pressure cooker vibes. One wrong word, one bad odor, and your romantic prospects could shrivel like yesterday's sakura. And if you're thinking, well, at least this gives introverts a shot, you're only half right. Court life was exhausting, requiring constant attention to social cues, appearance, and emotional subtlety. Still, there's something tender about it, too. The idea that desire isn't a flash of skin, but a slow unraveling of thought scent and shared melancholy. You sit by the stream for a moment, watching a court lady let cherry petals drift into the water as she hums an old love poem. It's sad, beautiful, and vaguely anxiety-inducing all at once. And that's what sexy looked like here: mystery, refinement, longing. And a really excellent pen stroke. Before you can process how emotionally exhausting that cherry blossom poem was, you're hurtled westward across time zones and centuries again, this time to the Islamic Golden Age somewhere between the 8th and 13th centuries. You land in a courtyard shaded by orange trees, the scent of rosewater curling through the breeze. A fountain murmurs gently beside you, and the tiles under your feet are cool and geometrically perfect. Someone glides past in a robe so finely embroidered, you're not sure whether to flirt or cry. Here, sex appeal is less about skin and more about the intellect and cleanliness. Yes, welcome to a culture where being smart, fragrant, and freshly bathed is basically the trifecta of desirability. In cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, or Damascus, both men and women valued knowledge, poise, and wit as essential ingredients in attractiveness. One mainstream historical fact, Arabic poetry of the period, is filled with verses praising not just a lover's beauty, but their mind, their way with words, their manners. You weren't just whispering sweet nothings. You were quoting Aristotle, sprinkling metaphors like jasmine petals, and possibly debating theology by candlelight. No pressure. You duck into a bustling souk, where perfume sellers fan glass vials of musk and ambergris under your nose. It smells divine and mysterious, and slightly like something forbidden. Hygiene wasn't just a religious obligation, it was erotic currency. People bathed frequently, wore scented oils, and maintained dazzling dental hygiene. It's said that a clean mouth was not only spiritually pure, but romantically irresistible. You wander into a tiled hammam public bathhouse and find it buzzing with quiet, steamy elegance. The bath ritual itself could be part of courtship, a time to pamper perfume and prepare to be seen. Imagine someone being seduced by the smooth way you rinse your hair, or how artfully you wrap your towel. Sexy. Right. Now your quirky tidbit, it wasn't uncommon to find beauty advice manuals during this time. One attributed to a famous female physician includes recipes for skin-lightening masks, lip tints, made from crushed beetles, and hair removal. Sugaring techniques that haven't changed all that much. Yes, body sugaring, your modern spa hack, goes way back. Ouch, history. As for fashion-flowing robes and long, carefully wrapped turbans, conveyed status and taste. Embroidery, especially in fine silks or gold thread, could set hearts racing. But again, it was all about restraint. Modesty in public was expected, but that didn't mean people weren't very aware of how to flirt within the limits. A woman's glance from behind a veil could be devastating. A man's low voice reciting love poetry by lamplight. That's peak seduction. Scholars of the time didn't shy away from talking about beauty, a desire, or romantic technique. In fact, they wrote about it in books that mixed medicine philosophy and a little mischief. The perfume guard. Anyone. And yet historians still argue whether all of this, these artistic intellectual ideals of beauty, extended far beyond the elite. Were average citizens swooning over sweet breath and poetry readings? Or was this another palace-level fantasy? Some suggest that among merchants, artisans, and rural folks, standards were a little more relaxed, and possibly a lot more fun, but we'll never know for sure. For no. As the sun sets over the courtyard, the air cools. Someone offers you a fig and a clever proverb. A group nearby begins to recite riddles about love and loss, sipping something warm from delicate cups. There's laughter, even a little blushing. You realize beauty here isn't a static form, it's a moving conversation. How you speak, smell, carry yourself, your sense of humor, your literacy, and okay, maybe also your eyebrows. Those mattered a lot. So as your 1,000-year beauty tour ends, what have we learned? That sexy comes in many flavors, sometimes shaped by power, class, or faith. Sometimes ridiculous hello lead face powder and black teeth. Often unattainable. Always a little bit political. But if you peel back the powders and perfumes, the gowns and more gowns, you'll see it's always been about longing. The desperate hope to be seen, known, and wanted. Whether through a love poem behind a screen, a glance across a bathhouse, or the clean scent of jasmine oil on a collar. Hey, maybe that part hasn't changed all that much. And now, as the last candle flickers out in some forgotten chamber of time, take a slow, deep breath. Let the lace and silk and crumbling coal smear into a gentle haze. All those standards, so strange, so vivid, can slip quietly away now, like petals caught in wind. The world we traveled tonight was packed with beauty rules that no one asked for, but everyone followed. Yet somehow each place held its own quiet poetry, its own yearning. Whatever your bedtime look tonight, hoodie, blanket burrito, or a face mask made of mystery. Ingredients, you're exactly as you should be. Breathe in soft and slow. Let the stories dissolve. Let the hush settle in. No corsets, no poetry contests, just you, the quiet hum of the night, and the soft weight of sleep ready to take over. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight, we tumble headfirst into the windswept vastness of the Mongol steppe. Endless skies, clattering hooves, and the smoky scent of boiled mutton wafting through the air. But instead of riding proudly alongside Genghis Khan, sword gleaming and meat roasting, you're the odd one out. A vegetarian. Yeah. In 13th century Mongolia. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive on the back of a shaggy Mongolian pony stomach already growling after a rough morning of riding. The landscape looks like a frozen sea of beige. No trees, no crops, no corner stalls selling lentil curry. The air smells faintly of horse sweat, burning dung, and milk that's gone just slightly wrong. Welcome to your new life. Your host, a friendly herder with a terrifyingly large smile, invites you into a gyur, a round felt tent that somehow blocks out the wind, but traps in every smoky breath of the cooking fire. Sitting cross-legged on a scratchy wool rug, you're handed a bowl. Inside, chunks of mutton floating in a suspiciously oily broth. Next to it, a lump of dried curds that could double as a building material. You try to smile. You try to decline. You mumble something about plant-based choices. The herder blinks. You don't eat meat. Silence descends like a winter fog. Here's the problem: ancient Mongol cuisine is not a buffet of options. If it came from a hoofed animal, it's food. If it came from the ground, it's probably not. These are people who rely almost entirely on livestock goats, sheep yaks, horses for their sustenance. Even water can be tricky to find, but there's always a jug of airag fermented mare's milk waiting. Historically, Mongols didn't farm. Why would they? Their nomadic life demanded portability speed and a deep reliance on animals. That boiled mutton you just refused. That was a sign of hospitality and power. Meat was not just food, it was culture, wealth survival. To turn your nose up at it was almost like turning your back on their entire way of life. You're not just picky, you're weird, possibly ungrateful, maybe even suspicious. To be fair, Mongol society was incredibly pragmatic. If something made you strong, fast, and warm, it was good. Vegetables didn't fit the bill. They weren't worth the trouble to grow in soil that barely supported grass. And fruit. A rare luxury, mostly traded from far-off lands via caravan routes that might get pillaged next week. But now, as the herder's wife ladles more steaming mutton into your untouched bowl, you feel like the only kid at a birthday party who doesn't like cake. You wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. The meat-heavy Mongol diet also wasn't exactly Michelin star level. Forget spices. Meals were often just slabs of fatty meat boiled in water, sometimes flavored with salt, if you were lucky. Bread, occasionally if someone had traded for flour. But mostly it was dairy and meat round the clock. And not in Pinterest-worthy presentations either. It was survival food, dense, greasy, and shockingly effective. One mainstream historical fact: the Mongol armies conquered most of Eurasia while surviving almost entirely on dried meat and fermented dairy. Not exactly quinoa and kale, but hey, it worked. But here's a quirky little tidbit for you. Mongol horsemen were known to drink blood from their own horses while on long campaigns. Just a small incision in the neck, a quick gulp, and the horse keeps going. Try doing that as a vegan snack. Historians still argue whether the Mongol distaste for farming came from practicality ideology or simple disdain for settling down. Some even debate if they intentionally avoided agriculture as a way of staying distinct from the sedentary societies they conquered. Either way, your salad dreams are shriveling faster than wild onions in a dry spring. The evening ends with more bowls of broth and awkward glances. You try nibbling on some cheese that smells like sour feet. It helps a little. But the sinking realization remains: this isn't a vacation diet. This is your life now. And tomorrow you're going to have to find a way to politely say no to goat brain stew. Morning breaks across the steppe like a pale flame, and the air outside the gyr is so sharp it could slice your lungs. You step outside, blinking into the dawn, stomach rumbling from last night's attempted cheese dinner. A nearby goat bleats in your general direction. Mockingly, you think. Your hosts are already bustling. The herder is churning something viscous and white in a goatskin sack, while his wife stokes the fire for yet another round of meat broth. Breakfast in ancient Mongolia is surprise meat and milk. And you still can't do either. You scrounge around for alternatives, eyes darting across the dry, unforgiving land. There's a patch of grass, possibly edible moss, a brittle sprig of something greenish. You pretend to examine it like a food critic. In reality, you're wondering if it's toxic. It probably is. One mainstream historical fact for the Mongol sustenance was synonymous with animal products. Meat provided protein and calories. Milk became yogurt curds, and the infamous airag fermented mare's milk with the kick of a mild punch to the throat. There's no Mongol pyramid of nutrition. It's more of a meat wheel, with a dairy center. So what did vegetarians eat? That's the thing they didn't, at least not by choice. In the rare instances that vegetables did show up, they were either imported by merchants from China or plucked wild during the brief Mongolian summer. And even then, they were usually boiled with meat or preserved in animal fat. You try asking for just the broth. Maybe there's a version without meat chunks. Your host stares at you, as if you've requested to eat his horse's saddle. It's not just confusing, it's borderline offensive. Mongols treated their animals with deep respect, but eating them was part of the cycle. To reject meat is to reject nature's gift, and there's no tofu here, no chickpeas, no lentil stew bubbling in the back. The word vegetarian doesn't even translate well. It's a cultural ghost. The quirky tidbit of the morning Mongols used to boil meat by tossing hot stones directly into leather bags, filled with water and meat. No pots needed. It cooked fast, tasted interesting, and filled the tent with a meaty sauna vibe that you now associate with hunger pangs and existential dread. Historians still argue whether any Mongols ever chose vegetarianism for religious or medical reasons. Some point to rare Buddhist influences from neighboring regions, but there's no solid evidence that this made it to the mainstream. If anything, monks might have eaten less meat, not none. Even spiritual ascetics needed fat to stay alive in these brutal winters. Desperate, you poke around the gyre. There's some millet in a pouch. Hope stirs in your chest until it's dumped into the mutton stew. You manage to pick out a few dry grains like a squirrel at a meat lover's buffet. It's barely enough to coat your molars. The real kicker. You're burning calories like wildfire. Riding, walking, just existing in this cold eats up energy. That rich, fatty meat stew is perfectly designed for this life. You, meanwhile, are on the ancient starvation cleanse, and it's not glamorous. By midday, you're lightheaded. A child offers you a piece of dried curd, hardened like a marble. You take it with a smile and gnaw on it like a determined hamster. It tastes like sour chalk and sadness, but it's technically vegetarian. Score. You're starting to wonder if this was how it ended for any accidental vegetarians back then, just quietly fading away, too polite to demand a carrot, too stubborn to eat goat liver. And speaking of goats, one is now following you around, possibly out of pity. By nightfall, the fire is roaring and the broth is boiling. Your hosts are laughing over a shared jug of airag. They gesture for you to drink. You take a sip, fizzy, tangy, and suspiciously warm. It's not bad, but it's definitely fermented. Your brain buzzes gently as you sit by the fire, body aching, stomach still half empty. You've survived another day somehow. But the question echoes louder with each grumbling hour. How long can you last in a world where plants are rare? Meals are meat, and salad is just a weird dream from another lifetime. You wake up stiff cold and vaguely hungover from 3 sips of airag. Your stomach makes a noise that sounds like a disgruntled wolf. Outside the gyre, the wind screeches over the plains. Breakfast. It's the same fatty stew goat curds and maybe a sliver of dried meat. You eye a few millet grains stuck in a leather pouch like they're gourmet gold. Today, your host family is migrating. The herds have grazed this area dry, and it's time to move. Yurts are disassembled like collapsible puzzles, and the family's entire life is packed onto a cart pulled by oxen. You're given a task: keep the goats from wandering. You accept not because you're helpful, but because you secretly want to sneak off and forage. For what you're not sure. Spoiler, you find nothing edible. A few berries, unidentifiable roots, a plant that might be wormwood or might just be immediate diarrhea. You pocket it anyway. Here's a historical truth: mobility was central to Mongol life. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of movement. The terrain offered little in terms of agricultural opportunity. Permanent farming was nearly impossible on the steppe, which meant if you didn't want to eat meat, your options moved with you, or didn't exist at all. You try to ask if there's any kind of bread. Your host offers you a dense, brick-like biscuit made from flour and animal fat, possibly lard or bone marrow. Not vegan, not even close. You nibble a corner and immediately regret it. Your gums protest. At midday, the caravan stops to rest, and one of the older herders starts preparing something strange. A broth made from boiled animal bones. No meat, just bones, simmered until the cartilage melts into the water. It smells like concentrated umami and heartbreak. You're offered a cup. You hesitate. Technically, no chunks. Spiritually pure carnivore. The quirky tidbit of the day: Mongol warriors sometimes carried dry meat cakes made from pounded sun-dried beef mixed with fat. They'd just add water to make instant stew. Imagine beef-flavored ramen bricks, no noodles, no joy. Instant survival zero appeal for a vegetarian. And then, the kicker: horse blood. On long rides, Mongol warriors sometimes nicked the veins of their horses and drank warm blood straight from the source, sealing the wound afterward. It didn't harm the animal, but it kept the rider alive during long stretches without food. You overhear a herder joking about it, and your vegetarian soul folds in half. Historians still debate whether any long-distance travelers carried plant-based provisions. Some trade routes, like those linking to China or Persia, might have exposed Mongols to exotic grains and dried fruits. But whether that food ever trickled into everyday diets, that's still uncertain. You certainly haven't seen a single almond out here. Later, while squatting near a pile of dung and pretending it's a meditation break, you spot what could be wild garlic, or a cursed weed. You sniff it, rub it between your fingers. You eat a bit. It might be edible. It's definitely bitter. The sun dips and you reach the new campsite. Everyone springs into motion, pitching gurs, securing livestock, starting fires. You help unload supplies, feeling like a particularly hungry ghost. Dinner is stew. Of course. You're handed a bowl with some floating onions in it. A gift, really. You focus on the onions. You pretend they're the whole meal. You chew slowly, savoring the illusion of vegetables. You've gone 2 days on practically nothing but sour milk and spite. But your body's adjusting. Maybe. Or maybe you're just too tired to protest anymore. You curl up near the fire and stare at the stars, which are breathtaking and uncaring. Out here, your beliefs are like grains of sand in a snowstorm, tossed around, rarely noticed, and ground down by the elements. Your resolve to avoid meat hasn't broken, but it's fraying. One more night, you tell yourself. Just one more, and maybe you'll stumble across a carrot, or hallucinate one. Either way, you're ready. Morning arrives with a grunt from a nearby yak and the acrid scent of singed fur. A young herder accidentally set part of his own sleeve on fire while lighting the morning hearth. Everyone laughs. He's fine. You, however, are not. You had a dream about lettuce. Just lettuce. Dewy green crunchy. It was both erotic and tragic. Today, the elders are preparing for a feast. A cousin is getting married, or maybe it's a lunar festival. You don't catch all the details your translator gave up on your dietary restrictions after day 1. Either way, this means one thing: meat extravaganza. Every pot skewer and spit is dedicated to honoring animals that once roamed these hills. The family is joyful. You are emotionally dehydrated. Your helpful contribution is to peel onions and stir a massive pot of guess what? Boiled goat meat. But at least the onions are technically vegetarian. You sneak a few pieces, relishing their soft, near-mushy texture. They're the closest thing to comfort food you've had in days. Now here's your mainstream historical fact. In Mongol culture, hospitality was sacred. Turning down offered food, especially during a celebration, was borderline insulting. So when someone passes you a steaming skewer of roasted mutton and beams proudly at you, you smile, you nod, and you do what anyone might in your sandals. You fake a cough, pretend you just sneezed into your hand, and dramatically excuse yourself. Behind the jur, you pace like someone trying to psych themselves up for skydiving. You debate it. Maybe just one bite for respect, but you hold fast. Barely. Even when someone offers you what they swear is just milk bread, which, spoiler, contains more sheep fat than flour. The quirky tidbit this time, Mongols used to store yogurt in animal skins and hang them off horses. The jostling motion from riding helped churn it into butter. Riding a horse to make dairy, it's efficient, practical, and utterly horrifying if you're lactose intolerant. Later, someone hands you a small dish of fermented mare's milk again. You try to politely decline, but they insist. This time it's slightly more sour, if that's possible. It tastes like what regret might feel like if you could drink it. Still, you swallow. You're officially 80% dairy, 20% dust now. But here's where it gets interesting. Historians still argue whether plant-based alternatives were even conceptually understood among nomadic Mongols. Some accounts suggest that religious travelers, especially Buddhists, may have carried dried legumes or imported grains, but that's in the texts. On the steppe. You're pretty sure a lentil would be treated like a magical relic. As the sun sets, the feast begins. It's lively, colorful, musical. You sit awkwardly at the edge of the gathering, chewing on a barely warm onion, and trying to act like you're totally full and loving life. Someone starts playing the moran kur, the horsehead fiddle, and a slow, melancholic tune floats across the plain. You close your eyes. In that moment, even the hunger feels poetic. And then, disaster. A small child sneaks up behind you and proudly shoves a dumpling into your mouth before you can react. It's greasy hot, and yes, filled with minced yak. You freeze mid-chew, cheeks puffed like a squirrel in distress. You can't spit it out. Not here. Not in front of everyone. So you chew. Slowly. Mechanically. A single tear escapes down your cheek like you've just betrayed your ancestors. That night you sit by the fire stomach, twisting with unfamiliar proteins and ancient guilt. Maybe you bent your rules. Maybe the rules broke you. Either way, you're still here under the vast Mongolian sky, craving lentils and promising yourself never again. But deep down, you know the next meal will test you all over again. You wake up shivering, even though you're wrapped in multiple layers of felt and wool. Turns out protein-rich meals don't keep your toes warm at night. Who knew? As you emerge from your cocoon of misery, you hear someone calling your name, or at least a version of it, shouted in a cheerfully aggressive Mongolian accent. Today, you're joining a foraging trip. Your eyes light up. Plants, roots, berries. Maybe could this finally be your vegetarian redemption arc? You grab your satchel and dash out like a medieval Whole Foods enthusiast. The rolling hills seem kinder in the morning light. The wind carries the scent of thawing grass and, yes, distant manure, but you're optimistic. A small group leads you toward a sparse forested patch where trees are a luxury and shrubs feel like celebrity sightings. You kneel beside a woman gathering wild onions. Actual, real plant-based food. You almost cry again, but this time from joy. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. While Mongolian cuisine is famously meat-centric, there were seasonal wild edibles like nettles, wild onions, rhubarb, and certain berries that nomads harvested during warmer months. They weren't staples, but they were known. You practically throw yourself into gathering them like a contestant on a dystopian cooking show. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The group also collects dried dung to use as fuel. You get to carry that too. Vegetarian or not, there's no escaping poop duty. Your quirky tidbit, Genghis Khan allegedly believed garlic gave warriors strength and cured disease. So even when vegetables appeared, they often had a medicinal or mystical purpose more than culinary. You chew a wild clove and immediately regret it. Your breath could repel a bear now, if bears even dared these steps. As the day wears on, you try asking someone if they've ever had a meatless meal just to feel less alone. They stare at you blankly. You switch to hand gestures, miming a vegetable. The response: laughter. Lots of it. One herder finally gets it and says something like, "Only when the animals run away." Historians still argue whether early Mongolian shamans or spiritual leaders had dietary restrictions. Some say yes, particularly during rituals, while others believe meat was seen as spiritually strengthening, not polluting. All you know is, if there's a Mongolian monk out there quietly sipping nettle broth, you'd like his address. Back at camp, you try to prep your haul. The onions are fine. The rhubarb's stringy. You think that thing might be a mushroom, but it might also be a rock. With limited tools, you manage to make something resembling a salad, which draws an audience of children and goats. The goats seem disappointed. The kids are just confused. Still, you eat your wild salad like a contestant on Survivor Gobi Edition. Everyone else eats roast lamb. You're chewing grass. But for the first time in days, you feel vaguely human. Is it nutritionally complete? Absolutely not. But it didn't bleed, and that's your new gold standard. That evening, the sky explodes into one of those surreal sunsets that makes you feel like you're sitting on the edge of the universe. You sip some boiled barley water, lightly toasted and smoky, and it's not awful. Okay, it's awful. But at least it didn't used to have a heartbeat. The family welcomes you back like you've returned from war. You hand over your bundle of wilted greens with pride, and someone kindly pats your shoulder before tossing half of it into the animal feed pile. You sit by the fire again, nursing your pride, and one final wild onion. The music returns. Someone jokes about your plant obsession, mimicking you, chewing leaves like a sheep. You laugh too, because what else can you do? Your stomach grumbles a confused mix of grass and despair. But hey, for one magical day, you were a successful forager on the Mongolian steppe. Tomorrow, though, you already know the yak butter is waiting. You wake up to the smell of broth, thick, fatty, unmistakably meat-based. Your stomach flips in protest. Apparently the foraging festival is over, and it's back to a diet that makes your inner herbivore cry. Worse today, you're expected to help prepare the communal stew. You stare at the enormous cauldron suspended over a dung-fueled fire, like it's a cauldron of doom. Spoiler it is. You're handed a cleaver the size of a toddler. Great. Just what a vegetarian wants: an invitation to butchery. But in a society where survival hinges on everyone pulling their weight, refusal isn't exactly a thing. You try to volunteer for root washing, bowl stacking, anything, but they laugh and hand you a sheep's leg. You sigh and get to work badly. Your cuts are uneven, your hands tremble, and at one point you almost drop the cleaver on your foot. Someone mercifully takes over and reassigns you to skimming the fat, which in theory is less traumatic. In practice, you're now elbow deep in sheep grease. Let's insert your mainstream historical fact before your soul flees your body. The Mongol diet was so meat-heavy because of environmental necessity. The steppe's short growing season and nutrient-poor soil made traditional agriculture nearly impossible. Herding animals like sheep-goats, horses, and camels provided meat, milk, and fat essential survival ingredients, not just culinary choices. Still, as you stare into the bubbling pot, it feels less like nutrition and more like something out of a horror novella. You try to fish out a floating organ. You fail. It wins. Somehow you make it through without fainting. As you stagger away, a child hands you a bowl of steaming stew, eyes full of hope and pride. You thank her, even though your stomach is screaming in 7 languages. You take a respectful sip of broth and instantly regret everything. Even diluted, it's like drinking liquefied barnyard. You politely accidentally spill the rest by a tree. The goats approve. Here's your quirky tidbit for the evening: fermented mare's milk called airag was a staple drink among Mongols. It's tangy, bubbly, and slightly alcoholic, basically ancient kombucha with a horse twist. You're offered a bowl. Desperate for a distraction, you drink. It is weird. Like yogurt and beer had a baby, and that baby was raised by horses. You don't love it. You don't hate it. You're just deeply confused. But hey, you're hydrated and slightly buzzed now. Victory. That night, while others eat mutton with wild abandon, you cobble together another sad salad. A few onions, a suspicious sprig of green, and a pinch of salt. You try to toast some grain on a hot stone, nearly setting your sleeve on fire. Still, it's something. Historians still argue whether the Mongols had social rules about hospitality overriding personal dietary needs. Some accounts suggest you were expected to eat what was offered, no exceptions. Others argue you could politely decline certain foods, especially during religious observance. You silently pray that today counts as a religious observance. Later, a shaman arrives, no joke, draped in bell's bones and bits of animal hide. He chants by the fire, tossing herbs into the flames. The air thickens with smoke and whispers. You half expect him to point at you and say, this one dishonored the stew. Instead, he offers you a boiled egg. From a duck, maybe? You could kiss him. You eat it slowly, savoring every non-mammalian bite. It tastes faintly of ash and salvation. Then he hands you another bowl of arag. This time, you raise it like a toast to vegetarian resilience. The fire crackles, drums echo into the open night, and laughter floats over the hills. Despite your daily digestive distress, you're strangely at peace. You haven't converted anyone to kale, but you've stopped being the weird grass eater and become more of the slightly tragic but amusing foreigner. You'll take it. As you lay down that night, belly only half full, but spirit oddly full, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, you could get used to this rhythm. Just with fewer intestines. Morning on the steppe hits you like a kick from a goat. Literally. One of the baby goats has decided your blanket is a trampoline. You groan, shove it off, and drag yourself upright. Today is hunting day, and you're absolutely dreading it. Let's be clear, no one expects you to wield a bow or wrestle a boar. You're not that far gone. But they do expect you to ride along, observe, and not faint. Because in Mongol culture, hunting isn't just sport. It's training for war, a display of skill, and yes, a mobile meat harvest. To them, it's glorious. To you, it's a front row seat to carnage. You mount a shaggy pony and join the procession of galloping warriors, each one armed with bows, knives, and eyes sharper than your kitchen shears back home. You're handed a spare quiver just for show, they assure you. You smile weakly and pretend not to hyperventilate. And here's your mainstream historical fact to cling to, like a saddle horn. The Mongols were legendary horse archers, training from childhood to shoot accurately even at full gallop. Hunting served not only to feed families, but to hone the martial skills that would one day conquer half the known world. The hunt begins. Riders fan out across the plains in a coordinated arc. You watch in horror-tinged awe as they flush out a small herd of wild antelope. Within minutes, arrows fly, hooves thunder, and animals drop in clouds of dust. It's swift, efficient, brutal. You close your eyes. You open them again because your horse is veering toward a ditch. You're fine. The antelope, not so much. Eventually, the group dismounts to skin and clean the animals. You're asked to help carry a haunch back to camp. You obey, clutching the leg like a guilt-ridden but obedient servant of carnivorous destiny. It drips. You try not to. Here comes your fringe tidbit for the ride. Mongols sometimes drank the blood of their horses, not out of cruelty but necessity. A tiny cut to the jugular vein allowed for blood collection without killing the animal, providing iron and hydration during long campaigns. You glance nervously at your pony. He seems fine, for now. Back at camp, the spoils are roasted, stewed, and smoked. And you poor leaf-munching soul are handed a choice: eat the liver or chew the heart. You ask if there's maybe a mushroom somewhere. A potato, perhaps. An old turnip. They laugh and shove a wooden plate your way. You nibble. The texture is like rubbery chalk soaked in broth. You chew for 46 years. You smile through it. You may cry later. That night, a young herder finds you by the fire, fiddling with your grain pouch. He crouches beside you and offers a handful of wild berries, tiny, wrinkled, but sweet as forgiveness. You nearly hug him. Instead, you crush them into your bread mush and eat like royalty. Berry porridge. It's not much, but it's yours. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire ever developed a true agricultural backbone to support large-scale, plant-based eating. Some scholars point to oasis towns where vegetables were grown in garden plots. Others argue these were exceptions, not the rule, more cosmopolitan quirks than steppe staples. The day ends with storytelling epic tales of wolves turned into warriors, horses that flew, and gods that whispered on the wind. You offer a story of your own, one about a woman who grew carrots so sweet, even her goats gave up eating shoes. It earns a polite chuckle. That's progress. You crawl into your tent that night, your body aching your stomach, mostly okay. Maybe it was the berries. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was finally letting go of trying to convert the steppe and simply learning to survive it. One more day, you whisper. One more meat-scented, smoke-smeared, wind-blasted, goat-invaded day. You might actually make it. The final morning greets you with a thin veil of fog curling over the plains, softening the sharp outlines of yurts and distant hills. The goats mercifully keep their distance, maybe sensing your fragile vegetarian spirit has suffered enough. You stretch, savoring a rare moment of silence. Today, they say, will be relaxed. You no longer believe that word means what you think it means. Breakfast is brace yourself. Fermented mare's milk again. You gulp it down with the grim determination of someone who's made peace with the universe. Then comes the real challenge. A farewell feast is being prepared in your honor. That's right. You. The one who spent half the week hiding behind barley loaves and sniffing wild onions like they were bouquets. A feast on the steppe, naturally, is a celebration of meat. Lamb, goat, horse, it's a symphony of sizzling, spitting fat. The centerpiece, a whole roasted sheep's head, eyes intact. You can't tell if it's smiling or judging. Probably both. You try not to make a face as it's paraded past you, like a guest of honor. A strip of flesh is carved off and offered to you with ceremonial gravity. You accept it with all the grace you can summon, then slyly wrap it in a scrap of cloth when no one's looking. You'll leave it later as an offering to the fire, hoping that counts as respectful. Now here's your mainstream historical note to chew on. Mongolian feasts were more than meals. They were communal rituals that reinforced bonds, celebrated the spirits, and honored guests. Refusing food wasn't just rude, it was spiritually suspect. Sharing meat was a sign of trust and kinship. A few elders engage you in conversation through your translator. They're curious about your diet, your country, your strange lack of fondness for gurgling dairy. One asks if people really choose not to eat meat where you come from. You nod. He squints at you as if trying to detect internal damage. Then he chuckles and slaps your back so hard you nearly inhale your tea. And now for your quirky tidbit. Some steppe communities believed that vegetables growing underground absorbed the dark energy of the earth. Meat and dairy, rising under the sun and wind, were thought to be more spiritually clean. So basically, your spinach was bad vibes. In a quiet moment, a young woman shows you a patch of herbs growing behind a tent with mint garlic chives, something that smells like celery but looks like grass. Medicine, she says. And for dumplings, but only with meat. You smile anyway. It's the closest you've come to a garden in days. As you help clean up, you notice something beautiful. Despite the constant meat haze, no one here eats mindlessly. Animals are blessed before slaughter. Bones are buried or returned to the land. Fat is rendered into candles or preserved for trade. Waste is rare. Meat isn't just food, it's a pact with nature, and that's oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether Mongolian diets have shifted out of necessity or cultural loyalty. With trade urbanization and climate change, some diets have become more plant-inclusive. But in rural regions, the ancient meat-centric lifestyle remains stubbornly, proudly alive. That night, as stars spackle the sky in familiar constellations, you sit beside the fire, munching the last of your crushed berry biscuits and feeling, dare you say it, satisfied. Not full, never that, but spiritually. Full enough. A final song floats across the camp, slow and mournful, sung in a language you don't speak, but somehow understand. It's about horses, of course, and wind, and life galloping too fast to catch. You close your eyes. You made it. The fire dims to glowing coals, casting soft orange halos on the earth. The wind, once sharp, now hums gently through the grasses, carrying the scent of smoke mint and a distant herd. You lie back on your blanket, the one that still smells faintly of goat, and feel the ground's quiet heartbeat beneath you. Around you, voices drift into silence, laughter fading into the hush of night. No more chewy liver. No more fermented surprises, just starlight breath and the distant hoot of an owl moving through the dark. Maybe, just maybe, even in a world of roasted sheep heads and dairy-soaked everything, a lone vegetarian can find a rhythm awkward, patchy, but real. So rest now, traveler of time and taste. Let the wind cradle your dreams, and the steppe carry you gently through the night. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where using the wrong hand could literally get you smacked, shamed, or even exorcised. You're about to wake up in a creaky wooden bed, stuffed with straw in a one-room cottage somewhere in medieval Europe, and you poor soul are left-handed. This probably sounds like a quirky trait to you, maybe even charming. But here, it's practically a spiritual disease. Sinister, by the way, literally means left in Latin, and it's not just a linguistic coincidence. People believe your left hand is the devil's playground. So yes, you're in danger before your feet even hit the cold-packed earth floor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time below. I love seeing where and when you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes crack open to a thin beam of light knifing through the shutter slats. Morning breath, hay itch, and the sour tang of last night's onion gruel still in your mouth. It's a normal medieval morning. You sit up, stretch your arms, and naturally swipe at your eyes with your left hand. Bad start. Your mother sees you and gives a little gasp, like you just summoned a toad from the chimney. Not that hand, she hisses under her breath, crossing herself. You try to remember not to use it again, but of course you will. It's instinct. As you trudge to the water barrel, still foggy with sleep, you dip your bucket, using your left hand. Your older brother smacks it out of your grip. The water sloshes into the mud. You'll curse it, he mutters, stalking away. So much for cooperation. You scrub your teeth with a twig, right-handed. And of course, trying to avoid more trouble, and get dressed. Except the tunic ties on the left, and guess which hand works better? You fumble with your right hand like a drunken raccoon. It takes you 10 minutes, and your sister rolls her eyes so hard they might get stuck. And it's not just family. The entire village runs on routines shaped by right-handed expectations. Doors open to the right. Tools are shaped for the right. Knives, shears, and ladles, all designed by people who never considered that the wrong hand might even exist, let alone need to stir porridge or shear sheep. Historians still argue whether this widespread disdain for left-handedness was more religious or cultural. But let's be real, the result was the same. You're wrong. By design. And it follows you like a shadow. You help your father milk the goat, which goes poorly, because your left-hand instincts keep misaligning your rhythm. The goat kicks. You get a hoof to the shin. Stop doing it backwards, your father growls. You try switching hands, but everything feels clumsy and slow. Some kids in the village don't speak to you. One little girl told her mum, you scratched your ear with the devil's hand, and now her dreams are haunted. Another boy said you cursed the bread when you touched it with your left. That earned you a beating with a willow switch. And no, it wasn't your parents. It was the village priest. Happy Monday. As noon bells ring from the distant abbey, the smell of barley soup fills the air. You help stir the pot carefully using your right hand this time. You try not to wince as the awkward angle sends broth splashing down your sleeve. No one helps. No one laughs. There's a moment later in the afternoon when a butterfly lands on your left hand as you sit by the firewood pile. For a second, it feels like nature doesn't mind which hand you favor. You don't dare tell anyone. It's yours. Secret. Beautiful. Quirky tidbit for the day: in some parts of Europe, midwives would slap a newborn's left hand to discourage future wickedness. Yes, literal baby hand slapping. Charming, right? You're tired, a bit sore, and not even halfway them through the day. But it's already clear being left-handed isn't just inconvenient. It's suspicious, shameful, and just possibly dangerous. You tuck your left hand behind your back as much as possible now. You've learned. The hard way. At school, things don't get any easier. You shuffle into the tiny church annex used for lessons, just 6 kids, huddled on low stools scrawling awkwardly on wax tablets or, if you're lucky, parchment scraps. Brother Alaric, your teacher and local monk, greets each of you with a half smile and a full expectation, right hands only. But your left hand twitches, eager to hold the stylus. It always does. You try to grip it with your right, but the strokes come out jagged, uneven. The letters wobble across the tablet like a drunk trying to dance. Brother Alaric frowns, watching you struggle. Other hand, he snaps. Your ears go hot, but you obey. The moment you switch, the shapes smooth out. Your fingers glide. For a split second, you're proud, until the priest's wooden rod wraps your knuckles. Don't let the devil guide your pen, he murmurs. Historians still argue whether these punishments were truly universal or exaggerated by later accounts. But we do know this: many medieval educators considered left-handed writing not just sloppy, but spiritually dangerous. And they weren't above driving the point home, literally with sticks and straps. Later, Brother Alaric pulls you aside. In his softest, most terrifying whisper, he says, "Left-handers are closer to temptation. Resist it, child." Then he pats your head, comforting in the way a wolf nuzzles its prey. You're not even 7. By mid-morning, the air grows heavy with chalk dust and the sharp scent of boiled ink. You try again, stylus in the right holding down the page with the left. Your handwriting is worse than before, but now no one smacks you, so win. Quirky fact: in some monasteries, monks who couldn't write properly with their right hand were forced to transcribe using a contraption, basically a wooden clamp that immobilized their left entirely. Bet you won't find that in your modern-day calligraphy class. After lessons, you help gather kindling outside the chapel. The priest's dog growls at you when you reach for a stick left hand again. You freeze fingers in midair. It smells the evil, says a boy nearby. He's only half joking. You try to laugh. It comes out thin. That evening, your parents speak quietly by the hearth, voices lowered so you can't hear. But you catch snippets. The priest says, "And we must fix it." Your stomach knots. Are they planning to send you away? Or worse, to someone who specializes in stubborn children? There were, in fact, corrective treatments for children who refused to switch hands. One method involved tying the left hand behind the back for hours or days at a time. Another was placing bitter herbs or hot wax on the fingertips. Historians still argue how common these methods were, but evidence shows they weren't unheard of. You lie awake that night, hand tucked beneath your side. You're starting to hate it, your own hand. You flex the fingers in the dark and whisper an apology to yourself. The next day, a traveling juggler passes through town. He tosses apples and knives and coins in a dazzling swirl. You watch awestruck until you realize he favors his left. So does his apprentice. And no one gasps. No one faints. They cheer. You can't stop thinking about it. At dinner, you dare to ask, "Can left-handed people be good at things?" Your mother pauses. "Only if they repent," she replies. You nod. You pretend to agree. But something inside you, something quiet and stubborn, refuses to repent. It's not like your body cooperates with their rules anyway. Every time you try to thread a needle, pour water, or stir porridge, your left hand takes over. It's faster, smoother, like it's always one step ahead. You've started calling it the secret hand in your head, as if naming it will protect it from being noticed again. But secrets have a way of leaking out. One morning, your father's friend, Master Odric, the local blacksmith, asks you to pump the bellows while he hammers away at a horseshoe. You're eager to help, but of course you instinctively grab the lever with your left. His eyebrow arches. You pump with your devil hand, he growls over the hiss of iron. You freeze, he chuckles thankfully. Ah, don't worry. Fire doesn't care what hand you feed it with, as long as it's strong. For a moment you're giddy. Someone doesn't mind. Someone saw and didn't correct you. But the thrill fades quickly when your mother hears about it. That night, she makes you kneel by the fire and pray to Saint Michael Protector against evil influences. For an hour, mainstream belief held that saints could intervene against moral deformities, including left-handedness. Whether they were successful is, well, let's say, highly debatable. You fidget during the prayer. Your knees ache. Your hand throbs from another whack that afternoon at school. And while you mouth the Latin words you barely understand, your thoughts wander back to that juggler casually catching daggers in midair with the hand you're not supposed to use. What if he was right, and your hand isn't cursed, just different? Here's something strange in some medieval manuscripts. Scribes clearly write with their left hands. Yet their work is beautiful, even revered. Historians still argue whether these scribes were truly left-handed or simply suffering from injuries. But the evidence is there, inked and illuminated in the margins of time. One day, you catch a rat. Well, you and 3 other children trap it in a barrel. While the others argue over what to do, you reach in left hand, of course, and grab it by the tail. You spin it in the air like a toy sling and toss it into the woods. Everyone stares. That was wicked, one boy whispers, half afraid and half impressed. You smile, wicked sure, but effective. Little moments like that stack up. You become the one who can thread a needle faster, hammer straighter, draw straighter lines in the dirt with a stick. When your older cousin dares you to sneak past the village Reeves fence and steal an apple, it's your left hand that reaches silently through the slats, curling around the fruit, like it was meant to be there. Thief's hand, someone mutters when you return. They mean it as a joke. Maybe. Fun tidbit in medieval French law, stealing with the left hand carried a harsher punishment in some regions. The hand could be seen as more sinister, literally, since sinistra is Latin for left, and thus more intentional. Silly maybe, but try telling that to a feudal lord with a grudge. You begin to live in layers. Outwardly obedient right-handed, inwardly defiant left-leaning. You train yourself to do everything twice, once for them, once for you. It's like living in 2 mirrors, always watching which version of you is in control. Then comes the festival. It's the feast of Saint Bartholomew, and there's a contest who can carve the cleanest turnip lantern. You're handed a blunt knife, a lumpy root, and a crowd of spectators. You hesitate. Your right hand twitches. Your left hand itches. And then you cheat. You turn your back slightly, carve with your left behind your cloak, and present a lantern with perfect little teeth and a wry grin just like yours. Brother Alaric scowls, but you win. Winning that turnip carving contest should have been the highlight of your season. You even got a piece of honey bread for your efforts. Real honey, not the cheap beet sugar substitute your family sometimes scrapes together. But sweetness never lasts long in your world, especially when you're left-handed. The next morning, Brother Alaric calls your name during morning chapel. His tone is sticky, with false kindness. You've got a special assignment today, he says, gesturing toward a side door. We're going to correct your habits. You follow him into the cloister yard where the monks do their copywork, gardening, and yes, punishments. You're led to a flat plank laid across 2 barrels. A quill and ink are set at one end. There's also a strange-looking glove, stiff as bark, lying on the bench. He motions for you to sit. Then he picks up the glove and slides it onto your left hand. It's tight. He binds it at the wrist with twine. From now on, we use the proper hand, he says, placing the quill into your clumsy right fingers. You blink. You're not in trouble. You're being retrained. In medieval schools, especially religious ones, this wasn't uncommon. Left-handed children were often made to wear restraining gloves, or even had their left arms tied behind their backs. The church believed left-handedness to be a sign of spiritual impurity, possibly even demonic influence. Charming right, so now you write slow, awful, scratchy letters with your right hand, while your dominant one tingles uselessly in its prison. You smudge everything. The ink dribbles. You accidentally flick a splatter onto a psalm, and Brother Alaric's gasp could have shattered glass. And yet you feel a twisted sense of amusement, because your left hand is tingling like it's laughing at all this. During your punishment sessions, your mind wanders. You imagine your left hand as a little outlaw, always sneaking behind monastery walls, tossing dice in dark corners, maybe seducing a kitchen maid. Meanwhile, your right hand is the fussy steward, bumbling through paperwork and muttering about the rules. One day, after another miserable page of crooked letters, Alaric sighs and flips open a book. This, he says, is a mirror book. He shows you the pages, writing that curves right to left like the letters are running away. You blink. The letters aren't just reversed. They're elegant, strange, fascinating. That's from the East, he explains. Arabic scholars, possibly even Leonardo's notes. Then he pauses, though historians still argue whether Da Vinci was truly left-handed or just playing with technique. You lean in, eyes gleaming. He snaps the book shut. You never see it again. The lesson is clear. Even brilliance, if expressed with the wrong hand, gets locked away. Later that week, you watch a pig slaughter. Not because you want to, but because it's a rite of passage, a village event. The butcher, a hulking man with stained arms, sharpens his blade. His left hand is wrapped tight in a cloth. He notices you staring. Lost a finger last winter, he grunts. Doesn't matter. Still got my knife hand. He slaughters cleanly, efficiently. You barely breathe. That night you dream your left hand is cut off, and you wake up clutching it, whimpering. You ask your mother quietly what would happen if someone couldn't stop using their left hand. She frowns, smoothing your hair. They'd best hide it well, she says. Or they'll end up like Jorund. You blink. Who's Jorund? A shepherd. From my childhood. Left-handed wild as a goose wrote music backward. She hesitates. One day a man from the abbey saw him make the sign of the cross with the wrong hand. And then Jorund disappeared. She says nothing more. There's no record of a Jorund, of course. Maybe he never existed. But his story sticks to your ribs like barley stew. It echoes in your fingers when you secretly draw patterns in the dust with your left hand. Spirals, symbols, your own secret language. At night, lying in bed, you flex that hand under the blanket just to feel it, just to remind yourself that it's still yours. The cold bites harder now, settling into your bones like a second skeleton. Winter means less field work, but more chapel, more candlelit hours hunched over grim psalters with frostbitten fingers. More moments where your left hand burns with disuse, while your right fumbles in the shadows. The glove stays on during lessons, but you've learned tricks. You loosen the twine just enough to wiggle free when no one's watching. You practice lettering under your blanket at night, scratching crude letters with a splintered stick into a piece of bark. The ink's gone, but muscle memory counts for something. But it's dangerous. Your sister catches you one night and gasps, pointing. That's devil's work. You shush her, swearing her to secrecy with a bribe of honeycomb. She glares, but takes it. Trust, you realize, is sticky, like that sweet, but it attracts pests. At Mass, you've started to notice how many things are designed for the right hand. The way you cross yourself. The way the priest blesses with his right. Always his right. Left-handedness isn't just inconvenient here. It's heretical. One monk even mentions how the Latin word for left sinistra is the root of sinister. That gets a chuckle from the younger brothers. You don't laugh. You're too busy pretending your hands don't sweat when they say it. Historians still argue whether these fears were purely religious or partially practical. Right-handed combat, for example, made formation fighting easier. A rogue lefty swinging a sword could throw off entire phalanxes. But in daily life, superstition did most of the heavy lifting. At supper, you sit at the far end of the bench so your elbow doesn't bump others. It doesn't help much. You're still that child, the one who stirs porridge the wrong way, who lifts bread with the wrong fingers, who drops things. One afternoon you spill a bucket of milk. The village elder's wife screeches. "It's that cursed hand," she cries. "Didn't your mother bind it yet?" She grabs your wrist. She's not gentle. Her own knuckles are swollen with age, and her breath smells of onions and old wine. She demands a red thread ties your left wrist tight, and mutters a charm over it. To ward off the evil, she snaps. Your wrist throbs for hours. You keep your face calm, but your teeth grind. The village witch is more popular than the local apothecary, and you suspect this isn't her first exorcism of a lefty child. And still no one ever asks what you think. Not until you meet Hugo. Hugo is the woodcutter's boy. Older, stronger, and clearly bored with everyone around him. One day you catch him flipping a knife in his left hand, spinning it between his fingers with practiced grace. "Shouldn't you be using the other hand?" you ask, half in jest, half afraid. He shrugs. "I use whatever hand doesn't get me killed." You must look horrified, because he laughs loud and free. "Look," he says, holding the blade out to you. "You want to stay alive out here? Use both. That's what foxes do." You're not sure what he means. But that night you dream of foxes with knives in both paws, clever and fast, always running just ahead of the hounds. You start watching Hugo. He climbs trees differently, holds tools differently. You copy him when no one's looking. You learn to shift, switch, adapt. Ambidexterity, it turns out, isn't just a clever party trick, it's survival. You even practice carving small runes with both hands. You tell yourself it's for balance, but deep down, you're preparing. One day the glove will come off. One day the quill will be yours again. But until then, you become a fox. You become a shadow. You become something they can't quite punish. Spring brings new mud and old hope. The thawed earth squelches beneath your boots, and the glove, permanently soggy, now grows stiff with dried clay and mildew. You try not to sniff it. At least the daylight returns, stretching longer with each sunrise, giving you more time to slip away unnoticed. You've gotten faster at chores, at hiding, at pretending. But there's one place you still can't fake at school. The village tutor is an aging priest with watery eyes and a nose like a split turnip. He smells of wax and frustration. He demands quillwork prayers and silent mouths, and he always places your slate and ink pot to your right. So every lesson you grip your stylus in your right hand, scratch out nonsense, and pray no one notices how the letters lean like collapsing fences. He does notice. "You're lazy," he tells you one morning, jabbing a bony finger at your smudged page. The devil tempts the idle hand. And yours is very idle boy. He yanks off your glove and holds up your left hand. It's pale from lack of use, but your fingers twitch at the sudden freedom. He scowls at that. "There's the beast," he murmurs, and the word catches in the other children's ears. From then on, they call you Beast Hand. It sticks harder than cow dung on boots. Historians still argue whether punishment for left-handedness was codified law or just local cruelty. Either way, it wasn't rare. In some abbeys, left-handed monks were assigned menial tasks indefinitely. In others, their left hand was tied during prayer, an enforced submission to divine symmetry. Here, it's just humiliation. You now write with a thick leather strap looped over your shoulder, keeping your left arm pinned. It aches terribly, but worse is watching your talent rot. You know you can do better. You feel it in your bones like a song gagged halfway through a verse. So you rebel in the only way you can secretly. You begin leaving small, perfectly written notes, left-handed, crisp and elegant, in odd places. A verse on the back of the prayer book. A psalm tucked inside the choir loft. A drawing scratched into the side of a pew, a child holding a quill in their left hand, eyes shut in defiance. It doesn't go unnoticed. Whispers start, some say it's a ghost. Others think it's the Virgin herself writing through a child. The tutor, already teetering on the edge of superstition, grows paranoid. He orders everyone searched. But he never suspects you, the one whose hand never improves, whose right-handed letters still limp and drool across the page. You play your role well, the dunce, the cursed one, the beast hand. Meanwhile, your secret work improves. One day you sneak into the scriptorium, a dusty annex with broken windows, and enough dead insects to make an apothecary swoon. You steal a few dried quills and scraps of parchment. You practice late at night under your blanket with a stolen stub of candle. It feels like lighting a tiny rebellion. You discover you can now write with either hand. Not beautifully with your right, but legibly. That's enough. More importantly, you can switch mid-sentence, an ambidextrous trick Hugo would be proud of. You begin copying texts. Old ones, forgotten ones. A joke about a drunken friar, a charm against toothache, even a list of herbal cures that include crushed beetles and boiled nettles. You leave them where people will find them. People whisper more. The tutor prays louder, and you start to feel dangerous. You've transformed from an awkward child into something quieter, slipperier. Not because you're smarter, because you were forced to adapt. Like crooked trees growing around stone walls, you found the light on your own. And yet one evening, your mother finds one of your hidden notes. You freeze as she reads it. Her brow furrows. Then she looks up. You wrote this. You nod, shame rushing like a river flood. But she doesn't strike you. She folds the note carefully as if it were a relic and slides it into her apron. Left hand or not, she says, "You write better than that priest ever did." Then she walks off, leaving you in stunned silence. It's the first time someone sees you, not the beast, not the burden, but you. And it feels like something dangerous just became sacred. Spring thickens into summer, and with it the veil of superstition gets heavier, not lighter. The village erupts into its usual seasonal oddities. Blessings for livestock, parades of relics, the occasional feverish exorcism when someone gets too many nosebleeds. And amid it all, you, the left-handed beast child, the walking omen, keep your head down and your ink dry. The rumors about you grow partly thanks to your own quiet provocations. The notes you slip into the chapel now contain riddles and sayings no one remembers learning. Someone whispers that a saint speaks through you. Another insists you're a changeling, swapped by the Fae. You meanwhile have taken to copying herbal texts from the scriptorium and hiding them under your mattress. It's not exactly witchcraft, more like curious first aid. But to the priest, anything beyond scripture starts to smell of brimstone. He grows suspicious. Not just of you, but of the idea that anyone in this god-forsaken village could write better than him. He starts inspecting everyone's hands. Left-handedness is now something to be feared. Mothers slap their toddlers' fingers if they reach left. Boys mock each other for picking up sticks with the wrong hand. One even cries when you offer him a pebble using your left. It's official, your left hand is cursed. One night the priest arrives at your home. Your father steps aside without a word. He's long since decided that your strange ways aren't his business. The priest barges in, reeking of wine and righteous fury. He drags you outside, candle in one hand, holy water in the other. "Show me your devil's hand," he spits. You hesitate. But this isn't a moment for bravery. It's a moment for strategy. Slowly you extend your hand. He doesn't beat it. Instead, he dips his thumb in ash and draws a crude cross on your palm. "We'll see if you can still write after tomorrow," he says, turning away. Historians still argue whether physical punishments for left-handed children were systematic or improvised cruelty. Some sources speak of fingers broken, others of hands bound until muscle memory atrophied. But most agree that shame, not pain, was the weapon of choice. The next day your desk is gone. The priest forces you to sit in the aisle where everyone can watch you fail. You're not allowed ink. Instead, he gives you chalk and a cracked slate. It feels like a slow public execution of your mind. You fake clumsiness. Let your right hand stutter. Let your head hang. Play the fool, the cursed one, the cautionary tale. But when dusk comes, you return to the scriptorium, your haven. You've hidden a few scraps of parchment behind a loose stone. You write feverishly like you're afraid the words will rot inside you if you don't let them out. You write about injustice, about silence, about learning to see in the dark. Your left hand moves like water. Then you do something risky. You sign it, not your name. Just an image, your left hand palm open, fingers extended. A symbol. You place it in the chapel, right where the priest will find it. He does, and the next day, your name is never spoken. Not in class, not in the fields, not even at home. It's like you've become invisible. At first it hurts, but then you realize being invisible means you can move. You begin to trade favors silently. Help others write love notes, tally debts, compose poems to recite during festivals. You're the village's ghost scribe. Your left hand becomes legend. And somewhere along the way, you stop hating it, because now your left hand is not cursed. It's feared. It's needed. It's yours. And no one, not even a trembling priest with ashes and threats, can take it away. So now you live in the margins, literally and figuratively. You stop showing up to lessons. The priest doesn't ask for you. The villagers avert their eyes when you pass, but not with contempt anymore. With caution. With a touch of reverence, even. You've become something like a ghost story that helps people sleep at night. Your secret scribal work continues, tucked into corners and whispered exchanges. You write confessions for those too ashamed to speak. You pen prayers for grieving widows whose Latin is as shaky as their knees. One girl brings you a love poem scrawled in charcoal and asks if it's worthy of a knight. You polish it like gold and send it back with a pressed flower. Meanwhile, the priest grows increasingly erratic. He starts preaching about demons walking among them. He insists that the devil writes with the left hand. He even burns a stack of old manuscripts he claims are contaminated. But even the loyal begin to roll their eyes. Then the rumor starts. Not from you. You're far too clever. But someone who once got help with their debts, maybe starts whispering that the village's mysterious helper might be blessed, not cursed. That maybe the left hand is a gift, a divine counterbalance to the priest's growing madness. Historians still argue whether this shift in thinking was widespread or limited to isolated villages like yours. Some believe it laid the groundwork for later shifts in education and tolerance. Others argue it was just another momentary rebellion forgotten as quickly as it came. But in your corner of the world, it feels real. And then comes the letter. A real one sealed with wax and stamped with a noble's crest. The priest's nephew, some minor noble visiting from the city, has caught wind of your miraculous script. He wants to meet the anonymous left-handed scribe who writes with both beauty and mystery. You don't go, of course. You're not about to walk into a trap. But you send back a response. A riddle. Written in looping, elegant script with a pressed flower tucked inside. No name. Just your handprint again. They love it. Soon more letters come. A small pouch of coins. A roll of vellum. A proper quill, delicate and curved. You recognize it instantly. It's meant for a left-handed writer. You stare at it for a long time. There's no joke here. No sneering whisper that it's the devil's pen. Just a tool. For you. Your mother finds you writing by candlelight that night and doesn't say anything. She just leaves a bowl of soup beside you and gently brushes your hair out of your eyes. For the first time in years, you feel seen not as a burden or a danger, but as a person. The priest vanishes a few weeks later. No one talks about it. One day he's railing about left-handed devils, and the next he's just gone. Some say he was called to Rome. Others claim he wandered into the woods and never came back. You keep writing. Your hand grows stronger, steadier. Your script becomes recognizable, a style of its own. People start imitating it. You even catch a schoolboy holding his chalk in his left hand, tracing your letters. You smile. The word sinister still means left in Latin. The stigma doesn't vanish overnight, but you've carved something out of it. A quiet space, a whispered legacy. And you wonder late at night if maybe, just maybe, being a left-handed child in the Middle Ages wasn't a curse at all. Maybe it was a crooked path to a strange kind of power. Not the sword and shield kind, not the pulpit kind, but the kind that changes things one letter at a time. You blow out the candle. Your fingers ache, but they're yours. Always have been. And finally you sleep. Your eyes grow heavier now, don't they? Like the ink drying on parchment, curling at the edges, fading quietly into memory. The weight of centuries drifts away, And with it the cold stone floor, the sharp glances, the sting of chalk and shame. You're not that child anymore. You're just breath and warmth safe in the hush between thoughts. Let your mind stretch out, soft and slow, like vellum under lamplight. Whatever burdens you carried tonight, you can set them down now. No curses here, no crooked labels, just stillness, just quiet. The world will still be waiting tomorrow with all its noise and nonsense. But for now, there's only this. A soft fan, whirring. The dark behind your eyelids. The hush of forgotten languages folding into dreams. Sweet dreams.